Welcome to the Light Reading Podcast. This is Phil Harvey. I'm an editor here at Light Reading. I'm joined on the podcast today by my colleague and fellow editor, Kelsey Zeiser. And our guest today is one of our colleagues at Omdia, Jaimie Lenderman. She's the senior analyst on Omdia's service provider technology network infrastructure team. And she covers cable and cable technologies. And one of the things she's been looking at closely is distributed access architecture and what the options are for cable companies as they're evolving their next generation networks and trying to in some cases compete with fiber, and in all cases trying to produce more bandwidth per subscriber while keeping costs as low as humanly possible. So we'll talk to her about what's happened with cable companies, why they're deploying DAA, where it's going next, and also we'll talk about the Cable Next Gen Technologies and Strategies online conference. That's happening August 26th and 27th, and Jaimie is speaking at that conference. Therefore, we thought it'd be great to have her on the show. So that is all coming up right after this. This podcast is sponsored by Comcast Technology Solutions. Backed by Comcast's 20 plus years in the broadcast and streaming industries, Comcast Technology Solutions provides the technology stack and expert guidance that allows Tier 1 media companies worldwide to manage their content from post-production through delivery. Hello, Kelsey.
Hello, Phil.
How's things?
Pretty good.
Fantastic. And one of our colleagues at the on the analyst side is joining us. Our guest today is Jaimie Lenderman, and she's a senior analyst and for network infrastructure and software at Omdia. Hi, Jaimie.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being on the show with us, and thanks for lending your expertise ahead of our big Cable Next Gen Technologies and Strategies conference.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
That is a mouthful, and that's on August 26th and 27th in coming to a web browser near you.
In cyberspace.
That's right. It's all virtual this year, as are most of our marquee conferences. So you'll be able to access the information on demand. That's the preferred way. And then if you register for the conference, you'll be able to listen to it later as well. But the big picture, one of the things we wanted to talk about, because the Cable Next Gen show is always about how cable companies are evolving their networks, what services they're offering, and that sort of thing. So the big picture is that cable is constantly under, all ISPs, all network operators are under pressure to produce more bandwidth per subscriber and keep their cost either the same or lower them. And they're doing so sort of in competition with fiber from the telco side. And one way they're doing it is by distributed access architecture. And so that's the method, I guess, the networking method. Is that kind of the way to describe DAA?
Yeah, it's, traditionally we've used the term centralized architecture. And so this is a movement towards putting the intelligence out in the field and some other methods.
Okay, so keeping the large parts of the plant they've invested in, and then moving bits around to make sure it can handle higher speeds, but in a slightly different configuration than traditional.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So what are some of the major DAA options for cable companies?
Yeah, so surface level, DAA it's really a collection of next-gen technologies with a single set of goals. These include to, of course, increase bandwidth capacity, but really on the operator side, it's to lower OpEx. And then the fun part is to achieve higher levels of system intelligence, as well as automation and configuration options. So there's several options here. And of course, we could spend a long time talking in depth about each one. But at surface level, some of these options include spectrum upgrades and node splits, which is something we obviously see cable operators already do. However, some of these new things are disaggregating part or all of the CMTS or CCAP, putting that into some of that intelligence into the field, or what we're calling virtualizing or putting it into the cloud. Another option is physically pushing fiber closer to the end user, and then utilizing digital optics, which is also, that industry term is known as fiber deep.
Okay. So fiber deep is, what was the other term for it?
Pushing fiber closer to the end user.
Okay, gotcha. Sure. Makes sense.
And what are some of the big challenges in deploying these technologies?
Yeah, so one major factor in order to see the long-term OpEx savings and the great benefits that DAA can bring is there's this big elephant, which of course is the upfront CapEx, to put it simply. Another major issue is a people issue. You're dealing with people who have, in some cases, worked on these systems for well over a decade or more, and this is transition. And furthermore, operators are bringing together teams that traditionally have not worked together much, such as the head-end guys versus the field technicians. And so there's not just network and systems coordination, but you're also seeing people coordination as well, and that takes some significant effort.
Yeah, that culture issue sounds similar to what some of the telcos deal with different teams that, maybe historically didn't work together, having to play nice in the sandbox, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's, some of the technology changes are drastic but the cultural stuff, I think, is where a lot of operators really get tripped up. Well, let's talk about some case studies then. Are there any sort of examples that come to mind of cable companies that are having success at deploying DAA? Because if I recall correctly, around this time last year, we were talking about how maybe DAA isn't really catching on as much as people once thought.
Yeah, unfortunately, the pandemic occurred right when I think we were starting to see some real momentum with DAA. But we have seen some very early deployments in Western Europe where they are deploying virtualization of, so putting some of the CMTS CCAP to the cloud in tandem with utilizing the field and some of these other DAA options. And this has really allowed some higher bandwidth along with automation and network analytics, and seeing some savings on the OpEx side already. And just to mention, before my DAA panel, there's going to be a presentation from Shane Portfolio. He is the Senior VP of Field Operations Engineering at Comcast. And I think he's got a really interesting presentation that's going to kind of talk more about some of their strategic moves to transform their network.
Yeah, that'll be great to hear from him, and sounds like it'll tee up your panel really well. What are some other key cable industry topics that you're looking forward to hearing about at the Cable Next Gen event?
Yeah, so, cable is really at a crossroads. We're hearing a lot about fixed mobile convergence and one network, and it will be interesting to see how cable operators take different strategic approaches over the next several years, especially as they adjust to a semi-permanent increased work from home, distance learning, as well as, continued fiber to the home competition from alternative players. I'm interested in hearing more about Next Gen PON for cable operators, which is another panel that's going to be led by a great Omdia analyst, Julie Kunstler.
That sounds good. We'll have to catch that as well. It's interesting with the cable company crossroads, as you put it. They're kind of in that, pay TV is kind of, I don't want to say going away, but it's certainly not. It's certainly capped as far as much as it's going to grow. So they've either got to decide that they've got real kind of strategic decisions to make there. We've seen some cable operators just completely go away from pay TV, and then others, keep it going as a something to, continue to tie into all their offerings. And then wireless as well. It's sort of like how, I guess the bottom line is like how much like the telcos do they really want to be? Do you feel like cable can, the cable companies can really prove that they have an advantage over telcos with their network alone?
It's very interesting. We're seeing, especially in Western Europe, that for the cable operators, the quad play package is pretty standard. So, you have your broadband, your pay TV, your voice, as well as a mobile or wireless offering. And that's becoming, it's been pretty standard over there for a while. And it's obviously in the last year and a half, it's really starting to catch on over in North America. And so I think through some of these steps towards fixed mobile convergence, I think there is going to be the ability to continue to compete here.
Do you think, do you see cable, the fiber deep thing sounds interesting too, because it's sort of like, pushes, by pushing fiber deeper into the network, closer to the subscriber, obviously that unlocks a lot of benefits, in terms of bandwidth and what you're able to accomplish on the network. Does it really save the cable companies, or does it really, make that big of difference if they were to just go fiber all the way to the premises, or is that just too expensive a proposition for many of them?
I think for many of them, to do all of that at once is definitely a large undertaking. However, we have seen a couple cable operators put their stake in the ground that they are going to do fiber all the way for their access networks. However, I think there is still a lot of life left in a lot of HFC plants, and there's tools to continue to keep utilizing it as more fiber is pushed into the network. Of course, ultimately, and when we're talking a couple decades down the road, the end goal, I think, of all operators is to ultimately be fiber to the home all the way. But there's, like I said, there's a lot of life left, and there's definitely some strategic tools that the industry have, and solutions vendors have put forth that are allowing cable operators to continue to use their plans.
I think that's a pretty pretty fair way to leave it, because that's ultimately the point of the Cable Next Gen show, is to explore all of those opportunities, talk about where the different cable operators are in their networks, and how they're getting from where they are now to the ability to either add more services or improve their networks substantially. Jaimie's panel is drilling down on DAA. That's on August 26th at 2:15. I believe that's 2:15 Eastern time, right?
I think so.
That's correct.
Yep. Correct. Okay. So 2:15 Eastern time, and that's at the again, the Cable Next Gen Technologies and Strategy Show. You can get that from the events section at lightreading.com, or you can search in your browser or find it through Informatech's website. There's all kinds of ways to get there, but just know that it's called the Cable Next Gen Technologies and Strategy Show. And that's where you'll see Jaimie Lenderman. Jaimie, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
That is it. That's our show. Special thanks to Jaimie Lenderman from Omdia for her time and insights today. Thanks as ever to Kelsey Zeiser for co-hosting. Thanks to our producer, Pierre Landrio, for making us sound good even when we don't. Please do tell a friend to subscribe, and thank you so much for listening to the Light Reading Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Comcast Technology Solutions. Backed by Comcast's 20-plus years in the broadcast and streaming industries, Comcast Technology Solutions provides the technology stack and expert guidance that allows Tier 1 media companies worldwide to manage their content from post-production through delivery.